Chapter 7. The hot days of cotton picking went on and on at the Riley plantation. Since the day she had first jogged up the elegant road with the swaying moss hanging from the giant oak trees, Julilly had not seen the fine big house or Massa Riley or his missus. She knew only the long, low sleeping cabin in the nigger quarters and the cotton fields, where the big branches shot out in all directions with blossoming white bolls, popping out like pure white feathers from 1,000 swans. Sim's savage lashings became a part of every day. So far, Julilly hadn't been touched. Her filled basket of cotton at the end of every day always weighed 100 pounds. She saw that Liza filled hers too. It was a fearful business to tote the baskets of cotton to the gin house for weighing and have Sims find them short. The old people suffered most. 25 lashes on the back with the cat-o'-nine tails was their punishment if they didn't meet the measure. Julilly sickened with each blow. More and more she and Liza talked of Canada, but they watched that no one listened. There were whippings for any kind of talk of running away. Sometimes, however, the other slave girls in their cabin heard them and offered fearful words of caution. "When I lived in Tennessee," one girl said, "my massa said that folks in Canada would skin a black man's head, eat up all his children, and wear their hair as a collar on their coats." "I hear tell," another whispered, "it's so cold in that country that the wild geese and ducks have to leave there in the winter. It's not a place for men and women." Another girl said, "Nothin' but black-eyed peas can be raised in Canada." Julilly tried not to listen. She must keep her mind on just one thought. Mammy Sally said this country was a place where slaves were free, and it was a place where they would meet. It lay there waiting beneath the big North Star. Each night Julilly and Liza searched the shower of stars in the black sky above the slave quarters until they found the brightest one. It stood guard above the row of lesser stars that resembled a drinking gourd. One morning there was a sprinkle of rain. Julilly and Liza cooled their feet in a puddle beside the toolhouse. "I feel in my bones, Liza," Julilly almost laughed, "that something's happening around here today that's special. Old Sims ain't so mean." The sullen pout on Liza's face shifted to a cautious smile. It gave her a girl's look that had been locked away in old age misery. "He maybe had an extra bucketful of breakfast," she chuckled openly. Julilly warmed to this unexpected humor. "You don't talk nasty like a snake's hiss," she giggled quietly. "Something sure is different with this day." The walk to the cotton field was eased by cool, gray clouds that covered the sun, and the furrows between the rows of cotton were soft with mud. But Sim's good humor didn't last. He was soon shouting threats and warnings against a heavy rain. It didn't come. The clouds eased away as silent as big bowls of cotton, and the sun shot out from under them into a blue patch of sky. The wet earth began to steam, and the black mosquitoes, dizzy with moisture, whined about Julilly's face. She couldn't swat at them because her hands had to keep up the rhythm of the picking. Liza, bent down among the lowest branches, swayed as though she might be sick. "My back is givin' me misery," she muttered to Julilly without lifting her head. The sun hadn't reached the top of the sky yet, and there was a row of picking before the short rest and miserly bit of lunch. Julilly wondered if she could bear the bugs and steaming sun a minute longer. This kind of wet heat soaked up all the air. Suddenly there were sly looks along the cotton rows toward the slave quarters, although the slaves didn't stop picking. A strange white man was walking up the road toward Sims. Beside him was tall, thin Massa Riley. Julilly knew him at once from his copper-red beard. His hair of the same color was covered with a wide-brimmed hat. If the strange man was a plantation owner, he didn't look or dress like one. He was dressed more like a Sunday preacher with a long-tailed jacket fully buttoned and a white shirt, starched around the collar. His stomach rounded out in front, but his straight shoulders and brisk walk had Massa Riley panting to keep up with him. Julilly felt no fear. If he were buying slaves, there could be no worse place to go than Riley's. But he was no ordinary man, she was certain of this. When Sims slacked his whip and strode toward the man, the slaves slowed their picking ever so slightly. The strange man bowed his head. It was large and covered with thick brown hair, neatly combed straight back from his forehead. He had a reddish beard and a mustache, too. Massa Riley's slow drawl hung heavy in the hot, listless air, and every word he said could be heard along the cotton rows. This is Mr. Alexander Ross. He stretched his words out slowly like strands of taffy. He's come all the way from Canada to study birds in our beautiful land of the South. Julilly stiffened. Her whole body seemed to shake. The word Canada came like a streak of lightning, knocking her off balance. Liza straightened her back and groaned with pain. She wanted to see this man from Canada, too. Mr. Ross bowed toward Sims. The two of them stood almost an arm's length from Julilly. Julilly stopped picking. She stared at Mr. Alexander Ross, who appeared to be looking at the slaves instead of seeking birds in the sky. His eyes crinkled with good humor. They were like old John's eyes at Massa Henson's plantation. One minute they mourned for a man in misery, the next minute they laughed like the merry tunes of a fiddle. The small, cruel eyes of old Sims were always the same. Julilly had learned long ago from Mammy Sally that it was easy to know the thoughts of a white man by the look in his eyes. A black man learned to keep his thoughts inside his head and pull the shades down over his eyes so the white man couldn't see inside. "I'm an ornithologist, Mr. Sims." The portly Canadian lowered a shotgun which he carried and extended his right hand to Sims. The handshake was brief. "I want to make a thorough study of birds in this area, and I could use several of your slaves to guide me." Sims wasn't impressed. He scanned the field and began picking at his yellow teeth with a sharp twig. "Guess you might as well choose them yourself," he scowled. "This is a busy time here, and I can't spare more than 2 men. Massa Riley broke in. "Mr. Ross here has enough scientific names for birds to fill a 200-pound sack of cotton." He viewed his guest with a measure of pride. At dinner last night, he had our guests charmed with his talk. Julilly continued to stare. The man must be from Canada. His speech as well as his dress was different. His words came out clipped and fast. They jumped along instead of running smooth together like those of all the white men she had ever known. "I'll let Sims here take care of all your needs." Massa Riley bowed to Ross, waved goodbye, and walked away from the fields toward the big house and the cool green shade of the magnolia trees. Sims' small eyes focused on Julilly. "Get to work, you nigger girl," he shouted. His whip slashed down across her back. It pained like the sudden sting of 100 bees. Julilly had seen others whipped, especially here at Massa Riley's, but she had never had the lash come down on her. She bent over and grabbed Liza's arm, preparing for another blow. It didn't come. Mr. Ross grabbed Sims' upraised arm and led him firmly down the cotton row. He walked straight and fast, all the while pointing to a far corner where a line of young men carried baskets of picked cotton toward the gin. Julilly doubled the speed of her cotton picking. She was angry and she was afraid. Now that Sims had picked her out as a slave who watched and listened to white men's talk, he would not forget. He would use his whip on her again. The sun glared with a white heat from the noonday skies. Sims returned to pace up and down the rows with his angry whip. There were cries here and there as he let it fall. Mr. Ross remained in the far corner talking with the young men. Chapter 8. The coming of Mr. Ross unsettled the slaves. Julilly felt it like a spark, flitting up and down the rows of cotton. There was something about the way the heavy-chested Canadian had grabbed Sims' upraised hand when he aimed to strike her again that roused a hope in Julilly's mind. She couldn't talk with Liza. Sims was too close. She began picking quickly, and when she thought it safe, stuffed extra cotton bolls into Liza's low-slung sack. Without moving her head, she could see Mr. Ross talking with one slave and then another. It was a long time before he finally walked from the field with 2 of them. The slaves he chose were Lester and Adam. Julilly stopped picking for an instant just to watch. Big, fast-moving Mr. Ross from Canada had chosen Lester and Adam to help him look for birds. Julilly knew she must talk with Lester soon. Sometimes on Sundays, she met him in the yard of the slave quarters. He was always angry, but he listened when she talked of home. Once she had told him what Mammy Sally said about Canada. He had listened hard then. His eyes were excited, and he had given Julilly that same cautious look of approval that came over his face the day she helped him from the swamp in the rain. "Don't you talk about this to no one, just to me and to your friend, Liza," he had cautioned. Tomorrow was Sunday. She would find Lester and ask him about Alexander Ross. Julilly and Liza finished picking their row. Far ahead of them, they could see the big Canadian with Lester and Adam enter the piney woods and disappear. It was dusk when the picking and weighing of the cotton was finished. Sims was nervous and uneasy as he checked the scales. Mr. Ross was back and Lester and Adam had been sent to carry baskets of picked cotton. Mr. Ross held his shotgun loose. The gray wings of a dead mockingbird stuck up from a bag that he hung over his big shoulders. Even though he had been tramping about most of the hot afternoon hunting birds, his thick brown hair and preacher-looking suit were as neat and orderly as though he'd been sitting under the shade trees of the big house lawn. He stood near Sims. "Now tell me, Mr. Sims," he asked with his fast-clipped Canadian accent, "how much does each slave pick during the day?" Sims mumbled an answer. "An amazing crop." The Canadian patted his great stomach and chest. "You know it's too cold in Canada to raise cotton." Sims perked up with his comment. "I heard tell," Sims grinned, his upper lip flattened against his yellow, uneven teeth. "It's such a cold place that nothing but black-eyed peas can be raised there." Julilly saw a smile flicker on the big man's face. Julilly and Liza, with the other slaves, trudged back along the dusty path to the slave quarters with lighter steps that evening. As though in some kind of celebration, a large black kettle swung over a crackling flame in the yard. It bubbled with greens and sparse strips of salt pork. There hadn't been greens to eat since Julilly came to the Riley plantation on the first day. She reached inside her crocker bag for the gourd that she always carried with her, ladled out a portion for herself and poured some for Liza into a tin plate. "Without you," Julilly Liza raised her tired head where she sat resting against the trunk of a thick oak tree, "I'd starve to death." That night in the long slave cabin, all the girls whispered about Canada and Mr. Ross. Most of them knew about the place. Word of it had crept along the plantation grapevines in the places where they came from in Virginia and North Carolina. They shared what they had heard. Liza knew the most. Usually she was quiet and sullen after the day's work, but tonight she felt like talking. She hunched her crippled back against the pile of rags to ease the constant pain. "This country is far away under the North Star," she whispered hoarsely. "It's run by a lady named Queen Victoria. She made a law there declaring all men free and equal. The people respects that law. My daddy told me that, and he was a preacher." A girl down the line named Bessie, who was tall and strong like Julilly, moved near Liza. "How you know where to find that North Star, girl?" she asked. Liza answered with certainty and precision. "You look in the sky at night when the clouds roll back. Right up there, plain as the toes on my feet, are some stars that makes a drinking gourd." Night after night, Julilly and Liza had been watching it when the stars hung low, sparkling and glistening. "The front end of that drinking gourd," Liza went on, "points straight up to the North Star. You follow that. Then you get to Canada and you're free. Don't you talk so much, girl." Bessie's whisper was sharp now and strained with fear. "Look what happened to you when you tried to get your freedom. You got a bent back and your legs got all beat up. I ain't looking for no more whippings than I already get." She rolled onto her rags and was soon asleep. Another girl nearby crept close to Liza and Julilly. She was a timid girl, hunched up like a little mouse caught in a corner. "I'm afraid," she shivered. "I heard a man say once that Canada is a cold country. Only the wild geese can live there. I'm afraid to go. I'm always afraid." She began to whimper. Julilly reached for her hand and held it until the girl went to sleep. By now the other girls, sprawled along the floor, were too drained and dulled by the daily work and scant food to care or listen. Their exhausted bodies needed sleep. Like workhorses, they found their stalls each night and fell exhausted into the heap of tangled, ragged blankets. But Liza hadn't moved from her hunched position against the wall. She wasn't asleep. Julilly could see her open eyes in the soft moonlight that spread through the cracks and open doorway of the cabin. It was late. The only night sounds were the chirping of the crickets. Every muscle in Julilly's body ached. She spread out flat on her back close to Liza, unable to close her eyes. The thoughts in her head jumped around like grasshoppers. Was Liza trying to reach Canada and freedom when Sims tracked her down? Free, thought Julilly. Free must be like a whippoorwill that could fly here and there and settle where it pleased, free could mean to get paid for your work like white folks. Free was like the free black boy who stood beside the tall abolitionist on the road to Mississippi and gave her water. If you were free, you wouldn't be whipped. Julilly couldn't stop her thoughts. She finally murmured to the silent, staring Liza. Liza. Julilly barely moved her lips. You thinkin' of tryin' to run away to Canada again? She felt Liza's body twitch. Slowly the crippled girl slid to the floor and put her mouth against Julilly's ear. You is my friend, Julilly. She barely made a sound. What I is goin' to say must not be told to anyone. Julilly nodded her head. Before the cotton is finished bein' picked, I am gonna slip away from here some night. Are you afraid? Julilly had to know. I am afraid, and I am not afraid. Liza's bony fingers clasped Julilly's arm. Like my daddy said to me, Liza, in the eyes of the Lord, you is somebody mighty important. Don't you ever forget that. Julilly nodded again. I'm scrawny, Julilly, but I'm tough. I think the Lord put that North Star up in the sky just for us poor niggers to follow, and I intends to follow it. There was a long silence between them. Finally, Julilly said slowly, her heart beating so fast she thought it might snap off from whatever held it in her chest, I am goin' with you, Liza. I'm afraid and I'm not afraid, same as you.